Hello again, everyone. It is Gordon Majak here, back with another Saturday afternoon episode of Timeless Pop, Rock, and Soul. And today it's kind of the perfect blend of all of those things, a little pop, a little rock, a little soul, and we can even throw some jazz in there because there are definitely some jazz elements in this song today. And once again, as is so often the case, as I've said so many times, when the muse strikes, I go where the muse takes me. Now, what do I mean by that? I woke up this morning. Hang on a second. This is driving me nuts. Oh my goodness. It just. I woke up this morning and I swear to God, from the moment I opened my eyes early this morning, I had one song in my head. Sorry. That I knew I was going to play today. And all day long, all morning long, all early afternoon, I couldn't get that song out of my head, and I was constructing my narrative of what I was going to say when I played the song, and I was thinking about all the musicians that are on the song, etc., all the way down the rabbit hole. I was just all wrapped up in this song. It was just a foregone conclusion that I was going to play it today, right? It was just a no doubter from the moment I woke up. One of my favorite songs, one of my favorite all-time vocalists. I mean, it was just a no doubter, right? So I come in here just now to do the video and I sit down and I'm sort of going through a playlist of songs trying to find the particular song that I'm looking for here in my library. And I come across something else and I shouldn't have even clicked on it. But of course, I just couldn't help it. The title of the song, I just went, oh my God, yeah, what about that? I forgot about that. And that was all it took. I clicked on the song and from the moment it started, there goes the muse once again working her magic, and out the window went the song that I had been so obsessed with and so excited about all day long. That went right out the window, and in its place is another song that has been on my to play playlist for quite a long time, but just have never gotten around to it until today. Now, as I have said recently here, we're coming down the home stretch of our run through the 70s. I've been on the 70s kick here for like months, right? And we only have two more songs. This is one, and then the next video. Two more songs from the 70s, and then the next videos after that, we will bounce into the 80s for a nice little stay, and I'm going to get to explore some pretty fertile territory. Musically speaking, of course, from back there in the 80s. We're almost there. Two more songs from the 70s. And I'm not going to say too much about this one because, man, I want the muse to just work its magic on you. But I do know for a fact, based on some recent comments that I've gotten on the channel on some other videos, I do know for a fact there may be a soul or two out there that will recognize this, and it will strike a pretty deep and pretty powerful chord for them when I show you this album cover. Now, from 1973, this is Jesse Colin Young, his fourth solo album, an album called Song for Juli. Is that right? Shit. Song for Juli. Song for Juli. Trust me, it's his fourth solo album. Now, Jesse Colin Young, if that name sounds familiar, of course, was the sort of the lead vocalist and the lead songwriter back there in the day in the late 60s, mid-late 60s and early 70s of the Youngbloods. And if you dig back into the history of the channel here, way back there in the early days of the channel, I told you about one of my favorite songs from the 60s, I think maybe late 60s, and that was the song Get Together, the classic Get Together by the Youngbloods, featuring this gentleman right here, Jesse Colin Young. But right now, we are up to 1973. Jesse Colin Young has left the Youngbloods long behind. He's on his solo career, well into his solo career, and this certainly the best-selling and probably best-known album from his solo career. Jesse Colin Young's Song for Juli, and a song called Ridgetop. Now, Ridgetop, to me, I don't remember exactly where I was the first time I ever heard this song, but I'm pretty certain that it was on the FM radio dial there in 1973. Because at 7 minutes? 7 minutes and 2 seconds. That's the only place you were going to hear the nice long album version of this, and it is just absolutely captivating and mesmerizing. And I'm sure even back there in 1973, when I heard this the first time, I was already so into that sort of jazzy rock and soul sound, like the Chicago stuff and the Steely Dan stuff and some of that other stuff that sort of blended soul and jazz and pop and rock all together in a really cool mix. Van Morrison had so much great stuff around that time. And so Jesse Colin Young, to me, just sort of came right out of that same, that kind of inspired blend, that similar to a Van Morrison of that era. And I was totally taken by this. I loved this song from the very first time I heard it. The cast of characters on the musicians is far too long for me to go to each one of them specifically, but I do want to shout out the great David Hayes on bass guitar, electric bass, and backup vocals. David Hayes, just an absolute bass legend in my book from the old days, with not only Jesse Colin Young, but Van Morrison. And so I did want to mention David Hayes. What a great bass player. So tasty, and one of the great driving forces behind this classic song. Jesse Colin Young, Ridgetop, and now it turns out, of course, you'll hear it's pretty obvious in the lyrics that Jesse is singing about his own home, or his former home, I guess, in this song, in the hills of Inverness, California, on a famous street, I think, called Drake View Drive. But unfortunately, his beautiful ridgetop, mountaintop paradise there was destroyed in 1995 by a wildfire. So very sad to hear about that, but this song is just so great and so timeless and such a seamless blend of styles. It's one that you just never forget when you hear it. And I know a few of you out there, you old school music heads like me, that remember this record. I don't remember. Now, I knew people that had this album in their collection at home, too. And I know Jesse Colin Young was one of those dudes that, on the singer-songwriter side, had a pretty cool, if not a sort of an under-the-radar career there. I mean, he was really kind of a cool dude. Great voice, wrote some great songs, cool singer, always had some tasty arrangements and stuff, as you'll hear here in a second. Jesse Colin Young, just a pretty seasoned veteran and a pretty savvy musical talent back there in the day, if I can say that he wasn't as popular as James Taylor and some of those other kinds of artists, but still had a pretty solid little core following there. And this may have been the high point, probably the high point of his long and illustrious career, both with the Youngbloods and as a solo artist. This one is just a trip, folks. If you know, you know. And if you don't know, you're about to find out. We are about to go on a journey to Inverness, California, back in the early 1970s. It is Jesse Colin Young and Ridgetop. Great bass work. David Hayes, one of the greats. Super tasty.
Well, I live on Ridgetop, and Lord knows I like it just fine. Where it's windy and foggy and quiet most
great rhythm guitar over here.
Now when I built my house, I cut 6 trees to clear out the land. But there's 30 or more left. And you know that they're gonna stand.
Ah, great.
It's a squirrel sanctuary. They think this woods is their home. And as long as I'm here, I'll make sure people leave us all alone. Yeah.
These horns. Come on. Killer band.
Yes, the hill that I live on is steep, and the road's full of ruts. And the people who live in the flatland think we folks are nuts. But the ruts in my road and the curve keep the tourists at bay. And it's lonesome and peaceful, and you know I like it that way. Now I work in the city. I think my job is a gas.
These horns.
And I know it's good for me to travel and get off my ass.
Come on.
But the very best parts of each trip are the Golden Gate Bridge. And the road like a snake that will lead me back home to my ridge.
Wow, what a band. Smoking track. Come on. Great piano. Whew. Lifting off through the roof. Absolutely on fire. Great. Unbelievable. Wow. Yeah, I shouted out there for Jesse Colin Young on some truly inspiring inspired vocals. I mean, as if the song itself isn't sort of divinely inspired in its own way, right? Inspired by his beautiful natural environment there that was his home in Inverness, California. Such an incredibly, that is God's country out there, folks, in Inverness, California. Believe me, so beautiful. Absolute paradise out there. So gorgeous. And I can only imagine to have a house out there, up there in the hills in Inverness above the ocean. Wow, gotta be incredible. Jesse Colin Young, such an inspired artist in this case, certainly. Great lyric, a great track, and the band just absolutely on fire. Of course, I called attention to the great David Hayes there on bass, just a superstar in his own right. But the whole band absolutely on fire for Jesse Colin Young there. The drums, the percussion, the guitar work I was hearing, the keyboards, the piano. Just such a remarkable track, such an energetic and driving track, and not even to mention the horns, man. The horns stole the show for me. I had not realized. I always knew, of course, about the saxophone solo, and I was well aware of that, and all the high-profile sax work in that song. But to hear that horn chart back there throughout the second half of the song, especially behind the sax solo and behind the rest of the band, what a treat. I had really sort of forgotten about that all these years later, but man, what a song. 1973, that's how the 70s were, folks. There was just bands, they were just artists, you know, that came up in that certain generation of artists there in the 60s that sort of came up through the musical groundwork, as it were, did the dirty work in the early days of their career and just sort of came up through the system. And there was a generation of musicians there that just, I think it was kind of a foregone conclusion that you had to be a good player and you had to be able to play a variety of styles and in a variety of moods and grooves. And this band certainly exhibit A of that, man. These guys absolutely on fire on this track and displaying some pretty cross-genre chops there. A lot of jazz elements in there, some great rock and soul elements. Just a really incredible performance. And that's sort of how it was back in the day in the 70s, man. There was just one after the other of artists and bands like that could just throw down on a moment's notice with some really tasty and really original stuff. And Jesse Colin Young and the band back there in 1973 certainly did that. On a Ridgetop, I love those lyrics. I love the way he tells the story. Just such a powerful track. And I know there's at least a couple of you out there that dug that one as much as I did back in the day. One 70s tune to go. I wonder what it will be. What will we go out with temporarily? Of course, we'll be back to the 70s later, but we got to make a run through some 80s and some other stuff for a good long while before we get back to the 70s. So what are we going to do? How are we going to leave the 70s with that one last song for the time being? I don't know yet. We'll see where the muse takes us, huh? She pulled a fast one on me today. Maybe I'll go back to the other one tomorrow. Who knows? Or later tonight. I don't even know. We'll see. Hope you dug Jesse Colin Young, man, 1973. Those were the days, folks. Back there, there was a freedom, not only socially, but certainly in the music back then. Artists could really stretch out and do some amazing stuff that you wouldn't otherwise have thought that they had in them, even if they had already proven themselves to be great in some other areas. Jesse Colin Young, one of those artists, man, pulled out some jazz on this one, and hell yeah, brother, go ahead, stretch it out. Love the way that one feels, always did. See you in the next one, folks. Jesse Colin Young on a Ridgetop. Not bad, nice life. Beautiful part of the country.